Let's take our digital cameras on a trip to the past. Today we're talking about Kodak Gold. For many of us who grew up before the digital age and before camera phones were created, the name Kodak was sort of synonymous with photography. For most of us, it sort of represents the memories from back when digital photography didn't exist and every major life event was captured on film. And either you were like Amanda's grandmother, who carried around a drugstore wind-up camera and took pictures of everything with it, or you were like my dad. He loved photography, and one of his most prized possessions was this little camera. It's a Canon AE1, and it's a pretty common camera, and there's nothing super special about this camera, except for this particular camera and Kodak Gold captured most of my family's milestones and many of my childhood memories on film, including some of the most embarrassing photos. Let's face it, all of our childhood memories were captured with those colors and those tones, and that's where Mastin Labs comes in. Mastin Labs just came out with their Kodak Everyday presets. This pack actually comes with 3 different films: Kodak Gold, Ektar, and Tri-X. If you're familiar with these films, it's because they used to be considered the everyday film. These types of films were cheap, easy to use, and you could find them everywhere. So it's easy to see why anybody over, say, 30 years old would look at these films nostalgically. The truth is that Kodak Gold is much more than just nostalgia. It's sharp, it's got great golden highlights, and it's got that pop of color to make it really stand out. So we're here in sunny San Diego, and we're going to take a few photos to take back to the office and show you how to get awesome results with Mastin Labs presets. So we're back at the office, and I've actually uploaded all the images that we shot in San Diego, and I've gone through and chosen these 7 to use to share with you guys how Mastin Labs Kodak Everyday Pack works. So we're going to select these 7 images and enter the developer module. And if you're familiar with Mastin Labs, you already know that once you install the Mastin Labs presets, they're going to show up under your preset panel. Today we're going to be focusing on Mastin Labs Kodak Everyday Original, and in this video I'm going to be focusing on Kodak Gold. Once you install Mastin Labs preset, you'll see it in the presets panel. When you click on it, it'll open up and you'll notice right away that it's actually organized into sections. First you've got your white balance, then you've got section 1, which is your film emulsion, section 2, which is your tones, section 3 is your lens correction option, and section 4 gives you a choice for grain. We're going to start by focusing on the film emulsion itself. So I'm going to select Kodak Gold 200, and right away you'll notice that the color changes on the image. But Mastin Labs actually has other sections in their preset to make it even easier to edit. The second step in the process is to choose your tones. Now in Lightroom, as you scroll through this, you get a little bit of a preview, which makes it easier for you to select the right tone for your image. For this image, I'm going to go with the next step is whether or not you choose to add lens correction or not. This is optional, but I personally choose to add lens correction to get rid of the vignette. And the last step is whether or not you would like to mimic film grain. I personally love the 35mm grain on Kodak Gold, so I'm going to add that to our image. But the thing that's most exciting about Mastin Labs is this new section up here for white balance. This is something that they've updated recently with all of their packs to make it even faster and easier for you to edit your images. You could choose between daylight, cloudy, open shade, tungsten, flash, and cool white or LED. These are all optional for you to choose what's best for your image. In this situation, I'm going to choose daylight. The last step for us is to go over and correct our exposure. The last step is for us to brighten the exposure to make sure that the image looks its best. The best thing about these presets is that everything is optional and you can choose what you want and what you don't want to add. Or if you prefer to have a little bit more control, you can adjust the temperature, tint, and exposure yourself. To give you an idea of how fast it is to edit with Mastin Labs, let's skip to the next image and I'll show you how easy it is to make adjustments. For this particular image, since the sun was pretty much set, I'm going to use the cloudy white balance setting that Mastin Labs has created. Once you choose the film emulsion, you'll notice right away that Kodak Gold has a very orange tone to it. Kodak Gold is known to be a fairly warm film, especially in the highlights, and it tends to be a little bit more contrasty than most people are used to. For this image, I'm going to choose shadows soft and highlights hard because I want to add a little bit more contrast for the dog's fur. We're going to choose lens correction on to remove the vignette. And lastly, we're going to add 35mm grain. Now I'm actually happy with the way this image was shot, but if you have the desire to, you could add a little bit more exposure to brighten this image up a little bit. Now this looks pretty much like the Kodak Gold film that I remember. For this image, the first thing I'm going to do is make adjustments based on my white balance. Mastin Labs has again given you all these base presets to choose from. This image was shot just before sunset, so I'm going to choose the daylight setting. Next up, I'm going to choose to adjust the colors based on Kodak Gold. For step 2, under tones, I'm going to choose shadow soft. I'm going to add lens correction, and I'm going to add 35mm grain to make this look as close as I can to the original film. With a bit of an adjustment to the exposure, and a little bit of an adjustment to the white balance since this seems a little bit warmer than I'd prefer, the image is all done. So I'm going to speed through a couple of these edits just to show you how quickly this can be done. We're going to choose daylight, Kodak 200. For this image, I'm thinking all soft so that we can save as much of the highlights as we can. Lens correction on, 35mm grain, and let's adjust the tint and the exposure just a touch, and I think we're done. Since this one is fairly even lighting, it'll be a little bit easier. I'm going to choose the cloudy white balance since the sun has already pretty much gone down. Gold 200 for the film emulsion. I'm just going to choose shadow soft for this one. Add the lens correction, add the 35mm grain, go over to the exposure and adjust the exposure just a touch, and maybe add just a touch of magenta to this image just to take the green down a little bit. So if you guys can't tell, I'm a big fan of Mastin Lab because of how easy the presets are to use. Once you get the hang of what it is that you are doing, it's easy to make a few clicks and color correct and edit images faster than you've ever edited before. This was one of my favorite images of the entire day. The sun had already set, so I'm going to set it to cloudy, Kodak Gold, shadow soft, highlights hard, lens correction on, 35mm grain, and with a little bit of an adjustment to exposure, this image is ready to go. I hope that this video is helpful to show you how easy it is to use the Mastin Labs presets, and I hope that you guys are excited as I am about the Kodak Gold preset. Below you'll see a link to Mastin Labs so that you can get the preset for yourself, and don't forget to hit subscribe and hit the bell so that you can see more of our videos.